Hello everyone, welcome back to the Addicted Bookworm, where my addiction is all over the internet. On this channel, I do book hauls, book reviews of both physical and digital media, audiobooks, and so much more. So in today's video, I am going to be talking about a bill that got introduced last week. It got a co-sponsor, which means that it has a very good chance that it will be heard in the Senate. Hold on a second, let me just... Oh, man, this is going to be a long video. I mean, not too super long, but it'll be long. So, he introduces a bill last week called the Interstate Obscenity Definition Act, or the IODA. The IODA is being touted as a bill to outlaw porn. Never mind, I'm not reading this video. I'm not reading. I said the P word. Corn. Corn. What basically happens is, if this bill becomes law, what will happen is that any online representation of X, and you know what I'm talking about, and all that type of stuff would be considered illegal. Now, this also applies to online retailers and physical places. So we have a shop just down the road. I'm trying to figure out, like, where am I positioned at on it, called Adam and Eve. And it is filled with all sorts of stuff that would be considered to be obscene. And why these businesses are not shut down is that you got to be 18 years old to go in. So they don't have children going in. So they're not doing that. But everything that Lee sees, and he's a representative from Utah, if I did not mention that, everything he sees is evil. And he's talking about how corn has come into these houses, and children have access to it, and all that type of stuff. And I will agree that corn has come into children's phones. And that is because children are naturally curious about this stuff. It's human nature to be curious about that kind of stuff. The stuff that leads to babies being born. So, what he wants to do with it, because he knows perfectly well that because Republicans have control of the House, the Senate, and the House, or the House and Senate, which way you want to go, that there is probably a good chance that he's going to get this passed. And also the fact is, you have a Republican that's in the big house. So I have a feeling that he's going to try every trick in the book to get this bill to the president's desk. And one of the things that I was reading, and this was not the article, but it was like the AI thing, because I typed in books and the Interstate Obscenity Definition Act, or bookstores and the Interstate Obscenity Definition Act, and sure enough, bam, I hit Pater, and it said that bookstores will be affected by this bill if it becomes law. So basically, he's claiming that we need to get rid of all of this obscenity to have something country. I don't remember all that he said. But when you have bookstores that are selling, like, okay, I went to Myers and I got this book, and I'm almost done with this book. I believe I'm on chapter 25. If If Lee has his way, this kind of book would be considered obscene. There's 2 open door X scenes in this book. I'm not going to say the full word. SX scenes. This would be considered obscene because it depicts relations between 2 consenting individuals. It also removes the intent prong of the Miller test, which I didn't think that a representative could change something that requires the Supreme Court to change. And they so far haven't changed it. So I do not quite understand, like, what the heck is going on here. So romantasy would definitely be targeted. Any kind of books that depicts, like, describes like or depicts like nudity, you definitely would not be able to have your actual so I'm trying to be G-rated here. You know how people buy movies or people go to movies and there's depictions of relations between characters and stuff like that. That would be outlawed. You could not film a movie in the United States that had those scenes in it. So a lot of actors who are used to filming those kinds of scenes would not be allowed to film those kinds of scenes because it would be considered corn. Every aspect of our lives would be affected by this new definition of obscenity. That's why in my books, the horror book that I'm currently writing does not have any depictions of corn or intimate acts or anything like that. I'm trying to, just in case some freaking idiot came across my book and bought it, they would not see it. They would definitely see like blood and all that type of stuff, but nothing intimate and nothing, So I gotta be, until I know that this law, if this bill becomes law, if the law is struck down, and or codified by the Supreme Court that this is unconstitutional, because the thing about it is, despite what a lot of people, I know there's people that don't like the Supreme Court, and I understand, they are not going to suddenly go and say, oh, okay, corn, alright, we're going to allow this law to be the law of the land, because, oh, that's just dealing with corn. No, they're going to look at the full thing. So, I am concerned about it. They talked about, like, it's going to affect publishing houses. So the AI thing was basically saying that because booksellers, like book distributors, publishers, all that, they do publish these books that have a lot of intimate encounters, that either they are going to have to be brave, like the people that came before them, or authors like Rebecca Yarnos and Sarah J. Maas and a lot of others, they are going to find themselves without any way to publish the rest of their series. Absolutely going to have no way. And my brother, when he read this, and I said to him, I said, remember last year I told you about this particular section of Project 2025, that they wanted to tell you what you could watch, what you could listen to, what you could read, and you totally ignored it. There's no way you're going to do it. Oh, this is just left-wing Democrat stuff. And then suddenly he reads about it, and he's like, oh shit, she was right. It's like, yeah, because I listen, but I also make my own mind up. So this is a attack on First Amendment rights. Now, I will be very clear. Obscenity is not protected by the First Amendment. Don't let anyone tell you obscenity is protected by the First Amendment, because it's not. If obscenity was protected by the First Amendment, you would not have child predators that are in prison, because they could claim that those pictures they have is protected by the First Amendment. It is not. Corn is not protected. Now, does this affect paintings and statues in museums? No. The bill does not affect statues and paintings in museum, because they're art. They're from the Middle Ages, or they're from the Renaissance, or they're from antiquity. So those are not affected because it has artistic value. You learn from what you see in front of you. So I will tell you off the way, if you think that Van Gogh is going to be burned alive, it's not. Van Gogh's paintings are not going to be burned alive, because it ain't going to happen. But if we talk about things like corn sites and books that have depictions of relations between two people, it also will affect LGBT books. It will affect people of color books. It will affect everything. These music video producers are going to have to be very, very careful about how they film their videos, because if it is designed to make you feel something below your belt, then that would be considered to be obscene. It has the ability to upend everything that we cherish as Americans. And yes, once again, I will say obscenity is not protected by the First Amendment. But there are people that use that stuff to do artistic things. And literally, you are going to have judges say that is artistic, or that has merit, or, Now, thankfully, it won't affect textbooks, because people know you got to understand about the body, because it's for scientific reasons, scientific endeavors. My brother was so shocked that this asshole is going to try to get a bill passed into law to outlaw the very things that he likes to play. He likes to play his video games. They've got scantily clad women in it. And it's just, he couldn't believe it. And I literally told him, I said, I told you it was coming. And he literally had to eat crow, because he was like, oh my lord, she's right, it was coming. Now, we wouldn't be having this conversation if things had happened differently, but the thing is, if you went onto TikTok shortly after the election happened, all they were talking about was LGBT rights and women's rights and immigration. They were not talking about the other stuff that Republicans plan on to do when they took their oath. And that really got me pissed off, because you don't care about them trying to do a new definition of obscenity. You don't care about book bans and book censorship, and the big lie that these people have been feeding Americans for who knows how long, stating that, no, we're not coming after bookstores, you can still order the stuff online. If this guy has his way, that will be as much of a lie as the earth is flat. That type of nonsense. They are going to go after bookstores. That's why, like that bill in Texas, which is still in committee. And I don't really think that it's going to leave committee, not with this particular federal law, or this certain bill that Lee hopes becomes federal law is going to go through. It's like, oh, why should we have to do it when it's going to be across the nation? you're definitely going to see like OnlyFans being targeted because of what they do. But I do agree with this one guy on here on YouTube that said that this stuff enabled them to do their work in a safe environment. They were in their own homes and all that type of stuff. They didn't have to worry about Johns and all that stuff. And even my brother said, you cannot dictate and control morality. And my mother was very adamant about that. You cannot dictate and control morality. It's absolutely impossible to be able to do it. But that's what Lee is trying to do. Lee is trying to dictate and control morality for everybody in America. But here's the thing that he doesn't seem to get. Next year is coming. Next year is coming, and guess what? There, people are going, when you go start shutting down corn sites, you start telling people what they can read, what they can watch, you go and take away their movies with their, all this stuff. They're going to go to the polls and they're going to vote you out of office. And people are like, how does this man have a job? And I said, you ever ask that question about the idiot that still has a job even though they've done nothing for the company? And they're like, how does this idiot still have a job? I don't know how he still has a fucking job. But I mean, there's a long sordid story about obscenity and about America government attempt to regulate it and to get rid of it. And there's actually a great course website. It's here on YouTube. I am forced to pay $5 every month, but it's a great course, and they have all these wonderful courses you can take. And one of them is about book bans, book censorship, and they talk about Comstock, and they talk about what he tried to do and everything. So that's the thing that gets me about it, is that we're trying to bring back Comstock. We're trying to bring it back, and in a world that is very different than it was back in the 1973. The Supreme Court did their decision that established, I believe it was 1973, that established the Miller test. And what this man is doing is he's basically saying, I am going to get rid of one of the prongs of the Miller test, and that's what we're going to use. But here's the thing. The Supreme Court is going to still use the 3-prong Miller test, and they're going to say, no, we decide if something qualifies, is by the Miller test. They're not going to listen to some representative from Utah trying to alter something that is not his to alter. He does not have the legal right to alter the Miller test in any way, shape, or form. He is a representative of Utah. He is not on the United States Supreme Court at all. So while he thinks that he's being all clever, we're going to get rid of one of the prongs of the Miller test, but then when the law goes to the Supreme Court, they're going to use the 3-prong Miller test. And and also I think what should also be decided on is, does a law, can, let me try to think here. I want to make this sentence sound good, or sound legible. Can a law ignore a test that the Supreme Court and other federal judges use to determine obscenity? And the answer is, as far as I believe, because I'm not an attorney, so please don't think I am. My own personal opinion is no. He cannot remove one of the 3 prongs of the Miller test just so that he can go and have law enforcement come in and arrest a whole slew of people, charge them with obscenity, and literally try to put them in prison for a very long time. Also, because corn is so integrated into society, it is literally interwoven into society. There is officers who I am going to take a very good guess will not even go to these people's homes because they watch it. They watch it. And it's also very difficult to find a jury that doesn't watch corn. So it's just this weird kind of thing that I'm seeing about how this man is trying to dictate and control every aspect of people's lives, trying to redefine obscenity, trying to get rid of the Miller test, trying to do this, trying to do that. And when I read in the AI thing that bookstores would be affected by this interstate obscenity definition act, and the fact is that they would have to send back like at least 98% of their stock, and is insane. And there are like the Rip Bodice. The Rip Bodice deals with romance. They have these covers. Now, the bill says any visual depiction of this stuff, and what I think is going to happen is you're going to have these publishing houses use an entirely different cover art to bypass this law, if it becomes law, so that authors can still continue to publish their books. And we'll see, we're going to see if that works. But if it does work, then people are still going to get their smut and their spice and all that. But what I also have a very big fear about is that, let's say for the sake of argument, and I'm going to use it a lot in a lot of videos of like this stuff, that TikTok does not go away. There are going to be people that are going to freely talk about the spice level and smut level of these books, and the government's going to be watching these videos, and they're going to go after these bookstores and all that, because people could not keep their mouth shut and everything. So, as I said, we're going to see what happens. My brother is not happy about the fact that obscenity might be redefined, and he literally said, I'm not voting next year. He is totally turned off from voting because he sees his First Amendment rights being railroaded, being eroded, and all that stuff, just so some fetish fiend in Utah can get his jollies off on depriving people of their First Amendment rights. So, yeah. So I am going to finish my obscene book. my obscene book. And I will definitely do a review of it before I leave. After that, I'm actually going to be down down to 2 books. So essentially what's going to happen is, once I am actually done with Oathbringer, I have that other book that I'm going to start reading pretty soon, and I am looking forward to it because Oathbringer has been one very, very, very annoying book. It has definitely. So getting away from the topic of dumbasses in the government, yesterday, early this morning, because I don't have to be at work tonight until 11, but I leave about like 9:45 with my brother. I went and I took, I threw away junk that I no longer want or need, And I went and I put as much of my fantasy books as I possibly could. I couldn't do all of them because I ran out of room in my tote. But I'm going to be having a horror library. And what I am going to be doing next week is I am going to be buying 2 totes, and I'm going to take the remainder of fantasy books that I have, that I've already read. They're going to go in the tote, and then I'm going to start taking down like the top part of the of my mystery ones, and then the ones, those are going to go in a tote, and then the ones I have not read are going to go into another tote. And then my next paycheck, I'm going to look at how many of my mystery books that I still have to put in a tote, and I will put those in, and that should be it as far as all the books that I own. They're going into that room with my AC heater thing, and I am going to turn this into a horror library. But yeah, that is that is very, very tiring to do, and everything, because what I'm actually also going to be doing is buying up horror books. I definitely want to buy up horror books before they're considered to be obscene, and I want to have them in my apartment and all that wonderful stuff. So I will end it here. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time.